how are you going to fund your deals? We have so many ways that you can actually fund your deals. So many ways. This is why we call it creative financing, because you're going to go out there, you're going to find deals, you're going to find flips, you're going to find opportunities. You may find some multifamilies, you may find some houses, you may want to buy your own house. You can use any one of these strategies to build your portfolio using creative financing. Creative means that you have to think outside the box. Creative financing means you're thinking outside the box. When you go to your lender, your bank, and you sit down in that office and you're talking to this banker, he can only see within the box. Everything happens outside of the box. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about creative financing. Show me the money. Give me some in the chat. Show me some money signals. Get in the bag. Whatever you got to say, but put it all in the chat, because this should be an exciting subject matter for you to understand where we're going to find the money, because that's always a question. People talk about, oh, I want to start in real estate, and I want to do it with no money down. Well, no money down doesn't exist, because the money actually has to come from somewhere. But the key is, it doesn't have to come from you. And so the first person that I ask and I go to when I want to do a deal, and I'm trying to do a creative financing deal, it will always be the vendor, the seller. I'm going to go and ask the seller for seller financing. And I want you guys to write that down. Vendor take back. These are three letters that you have probably heard a lot if you've been in real estate for a while. Vendor take back. What is a vendor take back? Well, a vendor take back is a type of mortgage in which the seller offers to lend the funds to the buyer to help facilitate the purchase of the property. The take-back mortgage is often and most likely will represent a secondary lien on the property, as most buyers will have a primary source of funding other than the seller. So you may have a first mortgage from a traditional source, but you may need that down payment to come from the seller in a form of a vendor take-back mortgage. So for a lot of people that don't understand how this works, if you are, and let's just, for the sake of this educational platform, we'll say that you're buying the property for $100,000. Okay, of course, we know that $100,000 for a property is pretty cheap, but for the sake of making things easy, we'll say that the property is worth $100,000. So 100K. Let me just put the speaker in mode. Okay. So 100K. Now, we know that 20% down on 100K means you probably have to put in 20K down. We also know that if you go to a traditional lender, they're going to want they're going to advance $80,000 based on the $100,000 purchase price, and they're going to do 80-20 loan to value, LTV. So that's an important three letters to remember. Loan to value. The typical bank or the typical lender, on average, a conventional mortgage is 20% down, which means 80-20 loan to value. So in this case, 80-20 loan to value means that you'll have to come to the table with $20,000 if the property was worth $100,000. Okay, so that means this would come from a lender. I say lender because the mortgages don't only come from banks, right? There's multiple different resources and sources that you can find money. So I'm going to show you that today. But let's just call the lender. It could be the bank, it could be a lending institution, it could be a private loan, it could be anything. But we're going to call this a mortgage. So you have $80,000 mortgage. Now $20,000. Let's say you didn't have the $20,000. You could convert this into a vendor take-back mortgage. So the seller lends you $20,000 and the lender lends you $80,000. Altogether, you have $100,000 and you've bought this property without having to put any money out of your pocket. Okay? So there's a few things that you're going to have to think about if you want to, if you're trying to do something like this. Well, first of all, not all lenders are going to find this favorable. I'm just going to let I see some people trying to come in. Not all lenders are going to find this favorable. In fact, some lenders, may want you to have a little bit of skin in the game. But it doesn't mean that all lenders want you to have skin in the game. When I say skin in the game, they might want you to have some money in the game. Now, the only way the only way the seller could give you a vendor take-back mortgage is if the seller actually has that available in equity. So let's just say the seller has $20,000 in equity. His property is worth $100,000, and the seller has an $80,000 mortgage. Well, when you sell that property, that $80,000 will need to be discharged, and that means that he'll have the $20,000 available that he can take back a mortgage. Instead of taking that $20,000, he'll take back the mortgage. The $20,000 gets registered back onto the property, secured on the property, exactly like a mortgage, and in essence, it becomes a second mortgage. So it gets registered back onto the property as a second mortgage. So you see, now your lender registers their mortgage, right, as first position, and then second position would be your seller that's registering his mortgage of $20,000. Now, you'll have to pay some interest, right? And the terms are to be negotiated between you and the seller. Now, the question is, why would a seller do this? Why would a seller do this? Why would a seller lend you money to buy their property? Why would a seller do this? Well, this is a few things that you need to think about, okay? Number one, if the seller sells their property, and if it's an investment property, right? So if the seller sells their investment property, they're subject to paying capital gains. Capital gains tax. So you can be in a position to actually help this seller avoid paying some of that capital gains. Now, you're actually deferring. You're actually deferring that payment into the future. But essentially, let's say the sale was $100K, but they gave you $20,000. That means they've only received $80,000, right? And so if they've only received $80,000, that means that $20,000 they didn't receive. It's still in the property. So they only will have to pay capital gains tax on the $80,000, not the $20,000. Now, it only gets deferred. Maybe they'll pay it at some point in the future. But this $20,000 now, they're going to charge you, let's say, 5% interest over 5 years. 5% interest over 5 years. they're recouping some of their expense in order to pay some of that capital gains. So it's a good way for the seller to defer their taxes, and that's why they would do this for you. Number two, they get to sell the property. Oops. They get to sell the property, right? So, there's at some point you're gonna have to find motivation, and maybe, for whatever reason, that property was on the market for a while, right? It might not happen in this market. It might not happen in this market, but it will happen in other markets, right? So, Ontario is not the only place to buy real estate, and the market that we're currently experiencing in Ontario is not the same market in Alberta. It's not the same market in Saskatchewan. It's not the same market in British Columbia. It's not the same market in New Brunswick. And so there will be some markets where you can actually work with the seller, and the seller will help you buy your real estate. So they actually get to sell the property. So they get to avoid capital gains, and they actually get to sell the property. Make sure if you're coming in, guys, make sure you are muting yourselves. Excellent. Okay, so you save capital gains, you sell the property, and you are making, so I shouldn't say you, I should say the seller. The seller is making more money. Number one, you could be in a position to pay more money if you don't have to qualify for a traditional mortgage. Also, the seller is making interest on the money that they're lending you. So, huge benefits for the seller. Number one, the seller gets to avoid paying that capital gains tax. I'm going to tell you, not everybody wants to pay taxes. Sorry, I said avoid. They get to defer those capital gains taxes. They get to sell their property. Obviously, that would be the biggest motivator. They're selling their property. And then they obviously, when they sell, they're making more money. Number one, they can probably get a higher purchase price than someone that's going to pay them cash traditionally. And they're making money on their money. They're charging an interest on the money that they're lending you. For you, what's the benefit as the investor and as the person that is buying this property? For you, you get to buy the property, not have to worry about qualifying for a mortgage. Now, we talked about 80-20 loan to value, right? Meaning you have to come to the table with 20%. Okay, 20% down. 80-20 loan to value, meaning you're getting 20%, and I'm going to put it like this. VTBs 20% down. Right? But I've done VTBs where I get 100% VTB. What does this mean? It means that the seller will transfer the entire property into my name, and then I just pay the seller the interest. So the vendor take back can be a very powerful tool for whatever strategy you want to apply, whether you want to add, use it to help you with some of the down payment, or if you want to buy the entire property with no money out of your own pocket. Remember, the money still has to come from somewhere. There could be an incentive for the seller to actually lend you that money. So the vendor take back will be the first place that I go and get funds. Next is the cashback. The cashback is an interesting one. One thing I will tell you about the cashback, you want to make sure that you're not trying to do a cashback, going to a traditional lender, because you know what, at the end of the day, they might not see that as favorable. But the cashback is pretty interesting. Let's say you're buying a property for $100,000. Okay. Now I know there's no properties for $100,000 right now. I'm just using this as an example, and you had to put down $20,000 because that would be 80-20 loan to value, right? 80-20 loan to value. You do have you when you get a mortgage, you get $80,000 mortgage. Okay, this is from a lender. So 100,000, we understand. Now here's the key component. Okay, if you find yourself a seller that is motivated enough, right? So you got a seller that is motivated enough to sell their property, to sell their property at 80,000. So they're going to take less for their property than what it's worth. Now you could do a cashback, right? So you can say, okay, I will buy your property for $100,000, but what I'm going to do is I will buy your property for 80,000. But what we're going to do is we're going to have an agreement that I'm buying your property for 100,000, and what I need is I need actually a cashback of 20,000. So if you're buying that property for 80,000, so let's go back. If you were going to buy that property for 80,000, the down payment would be 16,000. That would be your down payment, right? But because you're buying that property for 100, remember, you're buying it for 100. You're buying it for 100. But really you're buying it for 80, right? So you've already spoken to the seller and you say, listen, I'll buy your property for 80, but we need a purchase price. We need a purchase agreement that says I'm buying it for 100 because I want to buy it for 100 and I need a $20,000 cash back. So what's going to happen is, your lender will require you to bring $20,000 down, right, on closing, but you have a $20,000 cash back. So, in essence, the $20,000 in the cash back, it's a wash, and so then you get your $80,000 from the lender, and that means you've put essentially no money out of your pocket. Now, there's a few things about this, okay? Number one, you have to have a reason for this cashback. There has to be a logical reason. I mean, it can't just be a cashback for the sake of a cashback. For example, there was something on the roof that you needed to fix, some maintenance. There has to be a logical reason for you to do this. Number two, the property actually has to be valued. So the property actually has to be valued at $100,000, meaning it actually has to be worth the $100,000 that you say it is. Here's number three. Not every lender will want to do this. Not every lender is going to find this favorable. You might have to go to a B lender. You might have to go to a C lender. You might have to go to a private source. You might have to actually go to a credit union. But at the end of the day, these transactions can be done quite nicely, and it gives you the opportunity to put little to no money out of your pocket. Now, you may have to put some money if you're doing like larger deals, like $500,000 or whatnot. I just putting together a quick example so you guys could understand how the cashback works. And the idea is so you put less money down. So for example, if you had to put $30,000 down, you could be in a position to put less money down. That's the cashback. Second mortgages, okay? Second mortgages. And I'm sorry, I think I should have done that. So second mortgages. Okay, same thing. Let's talk about second mortgages. We're gonna go back to the $100,000 property again. Your property's worth $100,000. You need $20,000 down. $80,000 is gonna come from a lender. They're gonna have a first mortgage, right? So this could be any lender, right? Any institution. They lend you $80,000, 3%. They're gonna register their loan on your property as a first position. What's a second mortgage? Second mortgage is a second lender. That's all it is. Second lender, and they register a second position mortgage on your property. Here's something to take into account. This may be, let's say, 8% or 9%. The interest rate is going to be higher because obviously, the first position is safer. So the first lender or the bank or wherever you're getting the first mortgage from, they're going to be the safest. And so second position means higher risk. Higher risk means higher interest rate. But what happens if you get a second mortgage over here, right? And you got your first mortgage, essentially you don't have to put any money out of your own pocket, right? And so I'm simplifying this. Here's something that you might want to take into consideration. An A lender may not find this favorable. They might want you to have some skin in the game. So if you're doing this strategy, is because or any of these strategies, is because you have a end goal. You're going to renovate the property. You're going to increase the income. You're going to do something to create more value to eventually do a refinance, so refi some of these investments back out of the property. For example, you're not going to pay 8 or 9% ongoing for the rest of your life. The idea would be to secure the property, do some rentals, find some ways to create more value in the property, so you force the appreciation up, and then you refi the property, and then you pay the first and the second, and then you're left with one mortgage. So it's really a short-term strategy. So the first is going to be any traditional lender. Let's say could be anywhere between 2 to 4%. Always in the first mortgage is going to be amortized, but the second mortgage, don't be surprised if you see them and they're going to be interest-only type mortgages, meaning you only pay the interest, you're not paying down in the principal. Again, this will probably be something that is short term. All right, and let me see here. Next, oh my goodness, one of my favorites. Closing on the 3rd or the 4th. Closing on the 3rd or the 4th. One of my favorite strategies. Okay, let's have a look here. So, we all understand, and of course, we're talking about an investment property that has an existing tenant. And in our case, in this scenario, we're going to talk about a multifamily property that is bringing in $10,000 a month in rents. Okay, $10,000 a month in rents. Okay. Now, if you close, and traditionally, and we know this to be true, traditionally, most people close either on the last day of the month, so let's say the 31st or the 1st. This is the way it's always been done. This is the way people like it. It's just cleaner, and people can, people think about, moving into a new property on the 31st or the 1st, last day of the month or the first day of the month. But the problem with this scenario, and I'll tell you, when I started investing, I don't know, I felt awkward when it came to asking for money from my tenants, especially if I just met someone. Imagine meeting someone and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And then you're like, "Do you have my rent?" It's weird. It's just awkward. And so what happens if you close on the 31st or the 1st, the very first thing that you have to do is collect your rent. So you're going to go collect your rent on the first day, right? So you get your keys, you go to the lawyer's office or the notary, and you go and you collect your keys, and now you're excited, but now you got to, oh, jeez, I got to go now, talk to these people. Hey, guys, you knock on the door. Johnny's no, you don't know Johnny's work schedule. He works at nights, but he's sleeping in the day. He opens the door. He's all cranky because you didn't know, and so you had no communication with him. And so for me, this was a very awkward thing, and so I wanted to avoid this, right? Because if you close on the 3rd, for example, guess who collects the rent on the 1st? Well, it's the previous owner. The seller will have to collect the $10,000 on the 1st. And so you have now 27 days to get to know your tenants, to figure out what their schedules are and how that money's going to come in. Is it going to be direct deposit? Is it going to be e-transfer? Is it going to be cash or check? And so you have that ability, 27 days to actually wait for, get to know your tenants before you have to close the next one. And so to me, that's a really good strategy. But the funny thing is, and a lot of people are going to ask this question, Alfonso, does it mean you're missing out on the $10,000, right? Does it mean that you are missing out on $10,000 of rent? Well, think about this. On the 1st, the owner collects $10,000, right? So we know that. On the 3rd, when we close, we have to prorate that rent. So if you divide it by 30, comes to be about 33. So he owes me 3 days, for example, times 3, that's $1,000, right? So from the 1st to the 3rd, it's true. $1,000 of that $10,000 does belong to the seller. But the buyer gets the difference, the $9,000. So not only have you avoided having to talk to the tenants, but by closing on the 3rd and the 4th, you actually collect $9,000. And guess where you collect it at? You collect it on closing. When you look at your adjustments, okay, and so an adjustments at the lawyer's office or the notary's office is going to have credits and debits, okay? So credit, and this is the buyer, right? So you'll see credit to the buyer, $9,000, right? This will be credit. Credit to the buyer. So you get $9,000 on closing. What does this mean? It means you don't have to come up with $9,000 that you would have had to. For example, let's say you get to the bottom of these adjustments, And to close this deal, for example, down payment and closing costs or whatever, you would have had to come up with $80,000, right? Let's say your closing costs and everything was $80,000, but now it's going to be minus $9,000. So really you have to come with $71,000. What does this mean? It means you're actually using the profits of a property you don't even own yet to help you put less money out of your own pocket. And to me, when I figured this out, it was just like, it was just incredible. So that is the closing on the third or the fourth. All right, here's my favorite. Joint ventures, JVs, joint ventures. You see, there are so many ways. So JVs, joint ventures, okay? JVs, joint ventures. Getting together with a group of people and everybody bringing something to the table, right? Because doing joint ventures, this gives you the opportunity to do deals. Get into real estate with OPM, other people's money, right? Other people's money. OPT, other people's time, okay? OPM, OPT, even depending on your situation, you might need OPC, other people's credit, someone to help you qualify for these deals. So joint ventures gives you the opportunity to do deals all day long, other people's money, other people's time, and other people's credit, right? You want to go out and talk with family and friends. Talk to everyone, anybody that can participate with you, and that's an amazing way to get started. You know, even at the very beginning, when you're first getting started in your first couple of deals, maybe you don't have a lot of capital or a lot of time or a lot of credit. Well, look for people that complement you. Look for people out there that have resources that you may not have, and what you're bringing to the table is the intellectual currency. There's two types of currencies. There's the money, argent, dinero, what everybody understands as currency, and then there is the intellectual currency. It's what you know. It's what you know. So the more you know about real estate, the more valuable you become. The more intellectual currency you have, the less actual money that you'll need. We love joint ventures in real estate. Okay, next one. Next one is lines of credits, HELOCs, home equity lines of credits, or as most people know them as credit cards, but in the investment community, we know them as investment cards, because those credit cards should not be used to buy sneakers or furniture or a nice plasma TV. Those credit cards should be used to invest. And there's many ways that you could do that, but lines of credit, HELOCs, or investment cards could be a great source for someone to do deals. Rent to own, RTO. This is something we'll do on a future mastermind here. But the rent to own basically means that when you're buying a property, that existing seller has a mortgage. Well, if you do a rent to own, the seller holds on to the mortgage. So if we go back to this here, other people's credit, right? So if you're buying a property, let's say $100,000 again, $100,000, the seller has an existing mortgage of $80,000, right? So this is the seller's mortgage. Okay, this is the seller's mortgage. You could buy this property and say and make an agreement, right? Do a rent to own agreement where the seller continues to, nothing changes, right? The seller holds on to the mortgage and you pay the seller, right? So what you're actually tapping into here is other people's credit. The seller already has that mortgage, and maybe you discover a need that the seller has that has nothing to do with maybe liquidating that property, but it just maybe he just doesn't want to deal with the tenants or whatnot. There could be an opportunity. It's called a rent to own. You can also, I've bought, when you're buying apartment buildings, you call them agreements for sale or lease options or master leases. I've bought entire apartment buildings using this strategy of having the seller hold on to the mortgage. All right, so I hope you guys are making your notes, because we will be opening it up for questions very soon. But the next one is family and friends. Get your family and friends involved. This could be a really great way to fund your deals. And last but not least is, I don't have a slide for it, but it's think outside the box. What I've talked about here tonight is not the only way to structure deals. It's just a way or a few ways of doing it. I can go on and on. I can do a whole week session just on creative financing. All right, guys. So I'm going to open it up to you guys for questions. Let's just see here who's got some questions. Let's start with some questions. I'm on the live here on my YouTube channel. But if you guys can, let's start with questions that are related to creative financing. So if you have a question related to creative financing, you can ask it. So I see Michael has his hand up.
Hey man, what's up?
What's going on?
Nothing much. I just had a question from the VTB section,
Okay.
actually. So I was working on this wholesale deal recently. I was trying to possibly offer VTB as an option, but I didn't quite understand it fully. So honestly, I'm really happy you brought it up today. So my question actually was, when it comes to like setting up the VTB itself, I know the seller should probably own it outright or have minimal mortgage left on it. So when offering it, would it be best to offer let's say interest only payments at 5% for 3 to 5 years, or versus 0% interest principal only payments?
Okay, so we have an offer to purchase, right? So what was the purchase price?
I don't even remember.
Just ballpark it.
I think it was 300.
300K. Okay.
Yeah.
300K. So here's the most important thing that you have to understand. Okay. During your discovery call, right, or discovery of the seller. So the seller is wanting to sell this for $300,000, but somehow you need to find out how much of a mortgage, how much debt does that seller have on the property, right? For example, if that seller is trying to sell this property for $300,000, but their mortgage or the debt that they have on the property is $300,000, then they don't have any equity to be able to do anything, right? And so let's just say this is an older property. Let's just say this seller has owned it for a while, okay? So that means they have an existing mortgage of $150,000. Let's just say we're making a hypothetical. It's an assumption, right? They have a mortgage of $150,000, and that would need to be discharged on closing. So you could do a deal, right? Depending on the needs of the seller, and this is important. Most people go in and try to negotiate this right from the get-go, and it's really number one, it's a sensitive subject matter, because you don't know. So if the seller sells this property at $300,000, and they have to discharge 150, that means they have $150,000 in their hand. They may already have plans for that, and you don't know what those plans are. This is why it takes time to discover what is the real true motivation of that seller, right? And so so you have this, you have an offer to purchase of $300,000, and then you of course, if you do your due diligence, maybe at the very beginning you put it under contract, and then you may get to know the seller a little bit more, and then you may probably come back to the table, but you have to come back with a little bit of education, because not every seller is going to know what a vendor take back is. They're not going to understand how it works. But you could say, hey, I'll buy your property for $300,000, but let me ask you a question. What did you have planned? Because I know you have a mortgage for $150,000, but what did you have planned for that $150,000? The seller could say, hey, actually what I wanted to do is put that money into a mutual fund, right? And making 1 to 2% a year. So now you understand that really that seller has no need for that money. They're going to be making 1 or 2%. You could come to the table with, hey, do you know, and depending if it's a personal residence or an investment property, I'm going to go under the assumption that this is an investment property. Family. What's that?
It was a single family.
But was it his own property, primary property? Yeah. Okay, well, if it says primary property, he doesn't have to pay the capital gains. But if it was an investment property, I could show someone how they could save on capital gains and make more than just the 1 or 2%. But in this case, he's got the property at $300,000. You could say, hey, why not give me $100,000 VTB? So you could say, give me $100,000 VTB at 5% interest only. So this property gets registered back onto the property, and 1 or 2 instead of 1 or 2%, he's getting 5. His money's secured still on the property that he knows, and you have now $100,000 that you less that you have to put out of your pocket. So you have $100,000 VTB. You still got to come up with the other 2, right? But then you go to a traditional lender or a private lender or whatnot. But his money is secure, and this is how you would do it. Now this $200,000. Let's say it was a lender. So the lender is going to give instructions, right, of what you want. This VTB, it's going to be in the offer to purchase. So it's going to be in Schedule B, right, or Schedule A, and where you put all your conditions. It's going to say seller takes back a mortgage, with instructions for the lawyers now to create the vendor take back and register that vendor take back on the property.
Mm-hmm. So how would you come up with the what's it called? The time frame, like the time frame of the VTB, or is that kind of just
so you could that's another. We didn't talk about the term, right? So this is the term. So the term could be anywhere from a year to 5 years, depending on what you negotiate with that seller, right? If he agree, he might just say, okay, I'll give you a year with this money. If I'm going to do this, it'll be like 2 years plus. I'd want to renew it for another 2.
All right.
Good question. Loving the questions. Let me see here. If I can see I'm going to put it on everybody's thing just to see if I have any more questions. Okay. Well, I'm going to just stop our live here because I was on